Okay, so in this video I am going to talk about pregnancy and HCG and how we test for pregnancy. Now I have rigged this camera up, so apologies if it goes slightly wrong when I'm sitting on the floor. So let's have a look at this first. So first of all, this is your pregnancy testing kit. It's kind of like a stick formation, and at one end you've got like a wick, and this wick you dip it into the urine, and then the urine will travel up here, and then you've got these two windows, and that will tell you whether you are pregnant or not, and it will also tell you if the test is working or not. So in this you have monoclonal antibodies, and I'll cover that in a slightly separate video. So in the urine you've got a protein called HCG. Now HCG is produced by the fetus. So the mother's urine will only contain HCG if she is pregnant. Now think about the renal threshold. If this protein is in her urine, it must be below that renal threshold. So this is quite a small protein. But if the baby is there, the mother is pregnant, the baby's in the uterus, and the baby will be releasing this HCG, and so it will appear in the mother's urine. So I have kind of coloured it in as a kind of a green square. So that's HCG. Okay? Now, in the first part of the pregnancy kit, we have this dipstick. As I say, you put that in the urine will start to wick up. Now, this is what's called the mobile phase, or the mobile antibody, because this antibody here is mobile. It's not fixed here, it's free to move. Now, this antibody is specific to HCG, so it is a monoclonal antibody. It will only bind to HCG. Now you can see on here these little blue bits, they are blue beads. So we have an antibody specific to HCG, so it will recognise and bind HCG, and it is labelled with a blue bead. Okay? So if the mother is pregnant, the HCG will travel in the urine up into this portion of the pregnancy kit, and it will bind to this monoclonal antibody, and this monoclonal antibody has this little coloured bead for you to identify it. Okay, so they will form an antibody-antigen complex. So here we will get some little HCGs binding. Okay, so that's your HCG antibody complex. So that's what forms in this portion if the mother is pregnant. Now these antibodies are mobile, so they will start to travel up, just by capillary action, up through the test. Now you've got two windows, and these windows have fixed antibody. So it is sort of glued in place. And it is glued so that the antigen binding sites are kind of sticking up. They are free to bind with whatever they are specific to. So in this first window, you have an antibody that is also specific to HCG. So this antibody is specific to HCG. Oops, can't spell. And this antibody is also specific to HCG. So here it is fixed. So what you get, I'll kind of expand that window out to here. So this is the antibody that you would find stuck in place in this part of the test. So this antibody is also specific to HCG, but the HCG is bound to your first antibody. You have to have this first antibody in massive excess. You have to have plenty of it. So this will bind to the HCG that is already bound to that antibody, from the first bit, from this mobile phase. that is tagged with that bead. So any HCG that binds to that is also bound to that first antibody will have that blue bead. Okay? And so what you get is an accumulation of this blue bead. Now you get so much of these antibody, antigen, antibody complexes that you get a visible blue line. And that will tell you, yes, you are pregnant. Now, the problem arose when these first tests were first devised. The problem would arise if you knew the test was working. So if that didn't come up blue, you would assume you weren't pregnant. But what if the test wasn't working? So that's why they further developed and added in this second window. Now this antibody is specific to this antibody. Okay, so this one will bind to that first labelled antibody. So this is why you have to have it in excess, but any free antibody from this first section will continue up, and some of it will bind here, but the rest of it will continue up here. And so what you get up here, and again I'll expand the window here, you get antibody, antibody, but remember those antibodies are tagged with that bead, and so again you get another blue line, and what that tells you is that the test works. Now if you are not pregnant, then obviously you don't get that formed, and so you won't get a blue line. And so no blue line tells you you are not pregnant. Just try and get rid of that a little bit more, because you don't have any of this HCG. Okay? So this antibody won't bind here because there's no HCG. There's no HCG for this antibody to bind to, whether it's in the urine or on these beads. However, this antibody will still bind to this antibody, so you should still get a blue line there saying that the test works, but you are not pregnant. If you get no blue line here, what that means is that your test is not working. Okay?